2021 at 6 o'clock. We are in session. Shauna, could I get a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Bender?
Make sure both switches are on.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Here.
Director Harris?
Here.
President Finn?
Here.
The record will note Vice President Laliotis and Director Aguirre are absent.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. So as you are willing and able, please stand and join us for the pledge. Director Bender, would you like to lead us today?
Sure. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes this evening.
Very good, thank you. Now we have a moment set aside for public comment, and this is a time for the public to address the board on any matter not on the agenda. So testimony related to any agendized matter should be addressed at the time that that item is being considered. Do we have any public comment this evening? Please step up to the mic.
Good evening. Can anybody hear me through the mic with my mask on? Or should I pull it down?
You're welcome if you want to pull it down. We can hear you, or bend closer. There we go, perfect.
Okay, members of the Turkey Daughter PD. My name is Matt Tucker. I've been living with my family for firstly, I want to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to all of you, members, staff who are responsible for being out in front of the pack about being a clean meal. That said, I'm here tonight to encourage all of you to be even more ambitious when it comes to the PUD's goals regarding increasing our use of mix and enabling electrification. I stand here before you today as governments around the world are meeting in Glasgow, Scotland at COP26. This is a crucial moment in the global effort to rein in climate change. The good news, 105 countries representing two-thirds of the global economy coming down methane emissions by 2030. Bad news, China, India, and Russia, two countries that together are responsible for the third global methane emissions, decided to not even attend the conference. So why am I bringing this up? Frequently in conversations with reasonable, pragmatic people such as yourself on climate change, they like to bring up fairness as one reason not to act. No, it's not fairness. How you measure doing as much, this could either be a true or false assertion, but depending on which country doing more at any given moment is misinformed. Scientists have made a very clear, consistent message that humanity alone must reduce greenhouse gas emissions net zero by 2050 in order to make that goal realistically achievable, we globally need to cut our greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. Therefore, even if Trenton meets those goals, their time to reach those goals far insufficient. Therefore, and this is where the TDPUD comes in, any government at any level, or for that matter, a public utility district, has the will to go further. That institution has a moral obligation to go further and faster than the goals specified by the scientific consensus for the world as a whole. So when it comes to increasing the PUD's mix of renewables beyond 70%, when it comes to the PUD being an early adopter of new energy storage technology to make that increase renewables ambition possible, when it comes to the PUD enabling electrification of transportation and building construction, I conclude that it is a moral obligation of all the members of the Kentucky County PUD to first to make Kentucky a leader in decarbonizing transportation. Eventually, the rest of the world and the rest of our country will wake up to the consequences of greenhouse gas emissions. And at that point, small towns will turn to Kentucky for energy as an outlet. Also, our leadership and adoption of new green technology will bring the price down to those towns and cities. All of this means that we children and grandchildren.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tucker, for your comment tonight. Do we have any other public comments? Perhaps via the internet, which sometimes pop up.
No, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Which folds us right into our director comments this evening. Do we have any director comments? Oh, have a great night. Thank you.
I do.
Please, you're on stage.
Okay. So last week, I attended the 50th anniversary party for the Seroptimist International of Truckee Donner at the Downtown Community Center, and it is also the 100th anniversary of Seroptimist International. They're a nonprofit community group who raises money for several programs for programs, scholarships, and support of women and girls. They support the STEP program for teen mothers, recognize local women and girls' accomplishments, overcoming adversity, and other important programs through financial support. I am a former Seroptimist, and I know that there are several employees who have been member of this caring organization. So congratulations to SITD for their 50 years in Truckee. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Bender, do you have any comments tonight?
None tonight.
Right on. Thank you very much. And I do have a quick one. It's similar to what Mr. Tucker was talking about. Just a quick, pep talk to staff and my fellow board members. Thank you for all that you have done and are continuing to do to move us forward towards all of our climate goals. Together we are working hard to create a more reliable and resilient and green community. And I recently, in the past couple of weeks, listened to a podcast by Mary Powell. She used to be the CEO of Green Mountain Power in Vermont. I'm sure everybody in the utility industry is familiar with that provider. And she was talking about, the transformation that she led at that utility in a community that looks a lot like ours, kind of a rural, mountainous, tough weather conditions, all of the things that we have to deal with in our own community. But more importantly, looking ahead and how we can pull off this revolution that is going to have to occur. And she introduced me to a new concept, which I'm going to introduce to you, of radical collaboration. So we do have a history with the word radical here and radical empathy. So I was like, oh, and she's talking about, utilities haven't traditionally aligned ourselves with other, for example, the solar industry and the utility industry have not always been in alignment in our goals. We've looked at each other as adversaries, kind of, because it's a marketplace share thing. But that's changing, and it has to change, because we have to bring it all together here and bring it home, come back together as a community, a world community. So anyway, it was very inspiring, a lot of just reinforcing a lot of the ideas that we have had and have talked about, and how we have to start to embrace this sort of change and do the reverse of what another quote that I heard this week, listening to all the, I listened to a lot of things this week, but he is talking about how utilities typically boldly go where everybody has gone before. We are not usually a cutting-edge industry for very good, understandable reasons. But we have to, I think, push ourselves a little bit harder and a little bit further, become a little more uncomfortable, and just really embrace the space and the moment that we are in. So thank you for joining me in becoming more uncomfortable. Thank you. That's my statement for tonight. Which brings us to our action item. We're doing things in a little bit different order tonight than we have sometimes done in the past. So, action item number 8, consideration of Resolution 2021-18, commending Mr. Steve Roden for his many years of service. This is always enjoyable.
President Finn, if it's all right, I'd like to give a couple of general manager updates real quick.
Oh, I'm
before we do
sorry, I
that.
skipped you. And yes, of course, it's all right.
Just, thank you. On the topic of renewables and energy portfolios, I'm happy to report out, Mr. Horvath and myself were able to take a trip out to the Truckee Carson Irrigation District Board of Directors meeting to approve the extension of our small hydro generation energy procurement for another year. Also happy to report out that there were some promising discussions about acquiring more renewable energy credits through our relationship with them and potentially expanding that to additional generation. So while it is, highly drought and precipitation dependent, or, inversely dependent on drought, but it is a renewable energy that continues to build our portfolio, as Mr. Tucker pointed out. It's another great opportunity. I also wanted to touch on some of the progress that we're making in terms of outage management, reporting, and notification. I've received a lot of feedback from stakeholders and interested parties out there. Thank you for Director Harris for providing some of the experiences that she's seen out there. We are aware of it as a staff. We're working on it. We had some promising discussions with our customer service billing software platform, NISC, and their outage management systems that are available for us to incorporate into both our notification process and some of our actual workflow. So some great work there to be done. We are definitely pursuing a more real-time text-based notification for our ratepayers in the community, and also looking for an opportunity to provide that same level of service for those who aren't necessarily customers or ratepayers, but maybe visiting our community or our part-time vacationers or recreators here locally. So we are making progress. It is our goal to have something deliverable to this board and the community very soon. The other good news is that with the recent precipitation, the storm that we had a couple weeks ago or a week ago, we are out of our fire risk profile, so to speak, that operating profile with the one-shot, single-trip control profile. So our outages, while they may be storm-driven in the future, over the winter time now, they'll be under normal control profiles. They should be not as long in duration and not as widespread in scope. So the other good news is both NV Energy and the PUD have completed their substation capital maintenance and replacement projects. We are almost back to full capabilities in terms of redundancy of substations. The final switching here will be done in the next couple of days, but we will be back to what we like to consider full operating conditions on the electric side. Doesn't mean we're going to back off or slow down on our pursuit of a more dynamic notification process. And then the rest of this evening is a very electric-heavy presentation, so that's all topical with energy rates, budget, cost of service studies, and potential conservation programs out there. So I will stop there because we have a lot of workshops and presentations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. Now, on to item number 8. And Joe, you're going to be in the spotlight for a lot tonight, so please.
Well, good evening, President Finn, members of the board. Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Sounds like
I
it's
can't
on.
tell. Okay.
Click on the thing on the left. Try it.
Oh,
There we
it is.
go.
Oh, even more.
There it is.
Better.
The on switch. I should know about on switches. Continuing General Manager Wright's theme about all electric, we're going to begin with celebrating an electric employee, Mr. Steve Roden. Tonight's action is action item number 8, consideration of Resolution 2021-18, commending Mr. Steve Roden for his many years of service. Steve Roden started his career as a journeyman lineman with the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, PG&E, as they're well known, in 1978 in the Central Valley area of California. Some career highlights and milestones. He apprenticed in PG&E's Coalinga office, tiny little town between Fresno and Bakersfield. He worked for 16 years as a journeyman lineman in PG&E's Bakersfield division. He relocated to Reno. He heard the call of the mountains, and he left the Central Valley, and he came to the mountains, moved with his family to Reno, and he went to work for Harker & Harker, better known now as PAR Electric. They are an outside line contractor. They work for many utilities including the district in the California and Nevada area. Around the year 2000, he went to work just out of the Union Hall, it's called. So he put his name in for, and he worked temporarily for different utilities. The district picked him up, hired him in the spring of 2000 as a temporary journeyman lineman employee. We were so impressed with his skills and with the way that he fit in at the district and with crews and staff that we offered him full-time employment, which he accepted on June 12th, 2000. Steve continued to excel in his work as a journeyman lineman for the district. When a foreman position became available, he applied and was selected for a promotion as service crew foreman, and this happened a little over 10 years ago on April 6, 2011. But like all good things, Steve had another chapter in his life to pursue, and he announced his retirement to be effective at the end of October. In 21 years total with the district, but he started in 1978, so this is a 43-year career, over about half with the district, 21 years of service to the district. Steve has demonstrated superior knowledge and skills as a journeyman lineman and foreman. He's also demonstrated a commitment to district to safety and the other district values. He's earned the respect, the admiration, and the loyalty of his fellow peers on the crew and all district staff. Staff and his peers describe him as dedicated, loyal, knowledgeable, and supportive. Staff, and I know the board wishes to wish Steve the very best in retirement. And a few pictures, thought we'd show you a few pictures of Steve doing the things he loved to do while at the district. Of course, the picture on the left is just another, oh, I apologize, I didn't have it on full screen mode. Sorry for that oversight. Let me see if I can, so you can see the pictures a little better. My apologies. On the left, of course, is just another day in Truckee, right? Snow and smiling Steve with his thermos there in hand. Some more pictures of Steve and his service crew truck, his foreman truck, and of course a lineman in his hooks up on the pole, smiling, of course. And there's some group shots of Steve with the crews, with other electric department personnel. Of course, these were pre-COVID days. There's no masks in the picture. So there's no fiscal impact, of course, associated with approving a resolution for Mr. Steve Roden. And it is, oops, my apologies. I'm a bit of a klutz here with the slides.
I feel you.
And it's our staff's recommendation that the board adopt Resolution 2021-18 commending Mr. Steve Roden for his many years of service on the occasion of his retirement from the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that lovely overview of a career well spent. I'm going to open up. I have to ask for public comment. Do we have any public comment on this action item? I don't see any at the moment. Directors, would you like to comment this evening?
I would love to comment about it. Steve, I worked with Steve the 6 years that I was here at the PUD, and he always had a smile on his face. He was definitely into physical fitness to keep him young. I would catch him in the gym almost every morning doing his push-ups and sit-ups to make sure that he stays physically fit for this job. And I always loved his contagious laugh that he had, and he always had a smile on his face. So I wish him luck. Sad that he's not here tonight, so I could see him in person. But I am excited for him and his retirement and whatever the future may hold for him.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Bender?
All right. Yeah, thank you, Steve, wherever you are tonight. Thanks for hooking up the power. I got to hang out with Steve at one of my, at the house that I built that the family lives in. So he hooked up our power, and it was great to hang out with him then. So all the best in retirement, and thank you.
And I will, of course, add my thanks to that. I'm just always inspired by people who dedicate their life to service in that way. It's just we really depend on that for pretty much everything, everything good in this world. So thank you so much, Steve, wherever you are this evening, and also best of luck in your retirement.
I think it's important to note that Steve Roden does embody a lifetime lineman. We kind of memorialize that with a plaque to him, a lineman for life. And it was a great retirement party we had with full staff, and some of even his former supervisors came to celebrate a life well dedicated to that line work, as Joe said, 40 plus years of service to multiple communities. So good, best of luck to Steve. I know he's going to enjoy his time traveling in retirement.
Yeah, I truly hope so. I'm sure he will. So, do we have to make a motion?
No.
Please.
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2021-18, commending Mr. Steve Roden for his many years of service on the occasion of his retirement from the district.
I second it.
Very good. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
Thank you. The record will note Vice President Lalios and Director Aguirre are absent.
Excellent. Should we read the resolution? No? Okay, we're good. We had that wonderful presentation, and that summed it up very well. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Which brings us to our next action item. It's moving backwards. Action item number 9, consideration of the draft utility cost of service analysis and 100% green energy rate. So we are going to provide input to staff on the draft electric utility cost of service analysis and a 100% green rate energy study, and also schedule a public hearing at the regularly scheduled district board meeting on December 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter for the purpose of receiving input on the adoption of the proposed electric rate increase and a new 100% green energy rate. Whew. Okay.
It's a mouthful. Thank you,
It is.
President Finn. So this is action item number 9. With me also by Zoom is Amber Geschwend. She's the Managing Director of EES Consulting. And what I'll do is I'll go through a few introductory slides, and then she has a whole slide deck to present. So she'll join us on the phone, but I'll begin with these introductory slides. So electric retail rates, by way of well-known reminder, they're set by the board and adopted by ordinance. We have adopted 2 ordinances in the last 5 years. One increased rates for 3 years, and the most recent ordinance increased rates for the last 2 years, including this year. These are summarized in the following table. So going back to fiscal year 17 through 21, you can see the rates there. They're about 3% or so on average for the last 5 years. And so in the anticipation for the need for a consultant to assist in preparing the next electric rate study, staff presented and the board approved a contract with EES Consulting, Inc., or EES Consulting. EES has extensive experience in providing financial consulting services to public-owned utilities across the western states and many in California. And they were tasked, EES Consulting was tasked with the following 2 tasks. One was a comprehensive electric utility cost of service analysis, or better known as COSA analysis, and retail rate design update. And the other task was to analyze the possibility of providing a 100% renewable, or better known as a green energy retail rate option. And so at this time, Amber Geschwend, she's Managing Director of EES Consulting, will present an overview and the summary of the COSA study, the retail rate design, and the 100% renewable or green energy rate option. So I will be her slide jockey, driver, and I think she's on the phone already.
Hi, thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I have a slide deck prepared. It's first a COSA overview. What is a cost of service study? I know you guys heard this a little bit ago for the water utility. This will just kind of refresh your memory on what a cost of service is and how it's maybe a little bit different for the electric utility. And then I'll go through the cost of service results and then the green rate analysis. So if we don't mind going to slide 3. This slide shows the overview for how we do the COSA. So first we start with what are customer loads and forecast over the study period. You guys have worked hard on putting together your capital budget this year and the overall utility budget for the electric utility. And which are the basis for the revenue requirement for the cost of service analysis. So we take those inputs and we do the cost of service analysis, and we look and see how each of the rate classes are contributing to or paying for their cost of service. We use that to inform some rate changes and also what the rate design might look like as well. So on slide 4, this is just also kind of a higher overview of, when you're doing a study, you need to select the time period. For this study, we looked really at 2022, but we also looked a little bit longer out. Your cost of service model will look out 5 years, so you can see what's coming in the future and plan for rate changes over a period of time and how those impact the different rate classes. So we'll use all those inputs for the revenue requirement. What are your annual expenses? We'll look at what revenues you're collecting at the current rates. And then we use the cost of service model to allocate all of those expenses based on what they're for. Is it for power supply? Is it for your distribution system? And then how those customers in those classes use those parts of your system. We allocate those to each of the class and then use the results to design the rates. So slide 5, why do we do a cost of service? Well, we want to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share. We don't want any subsidies across classes. We want to make sure that your revenue is aligned with what the cost is to serve customers. And of course, you want to provide accurate price signals to customers and how they're using their energy. So slide 6, this goes through a couple different types of cost of service studies. One is the average embedded cost of service, which is the study that we worked on for you guys. It's most widely used methodology for doing cost of service analysis. It's based on historic costs, looking at the expenses that you've actually paid or expect to pay, and the results come out to show what those costs are in terms of dollars per customer or dollars per kilowatt hour. And these are really great for showing what your actual costs are now and in the future. They're pretty easy to understand. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of utilities, vast majority use an embedded cost of service. Some drawbacks of using the embedded analysis is that if there's really big changes coming, the results may not reflect that as easily because it's averaging those new changes in with what has been done historically. So on slide 7, talking through the second option is looking more at a marginal or incremental cost of service. So this is using marginal cost to price service items such as the cost to install new poles and wires, market prices for power instead of what your actual power contracts are. And this is a great method for, I like using marginal cost for or more rate design components. It's really great at communicating accurate price signals. The drawback of using a marginal cost study is that it can change a lot from year to year, as marginal costs change more frequently than average costs. So that's just some background on the types of studies. Again, we used an embedded cost of service analysis for Truckee Donner. So slide 8, here's kind of our step-by-step approach. Again, we collect customer data. How many customers did you have last year? Service accounts. How much energy did they use? How coincident are their peaks with your system peak? All of that information tells us who is driving the cost of your power supply and in your distribution system. So we use take the revenue requirement, we functionalize that into different, actually, if we don't mind going to slide 9, I like this one better for talking about how we functionalize, classify, and allocate to customers. So this is a flow chart showing how the cost of service works. So each line item is classified as production, transmission, distribution, or other, which might be like shared services. And then classified into different components, customer, energy, demand. And then those costs are allocated finally to customer classes based on how they're using the system. Okay, just a couple different methods, because this is going to come up in the results that I'm going to show you. There's 2 pretty standard ways that distribution system costs in particular are allocated. There's the minimum system and 100% demand. So the minimum system is allocating costs based on both customer and demand components. Basically, it says you have your distribution system in place because you have customers there, and a little bit also because they're using some amount of energy. And this method ends up allocating more costs to classes with a larger number of customers, like residential classically would have a higher share of the distribution system costs under this methodology. The alternative method is saying that your distribution system is in place because customers use energy and they have demand on the system. And so all the costs are allocated based on how each customer class uses or what their demand is for the system. Sorry, excuse me for just 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, so 100% demand will generally assign more costs to larger demand customer classes, such as large general service, for example. Okay. Let's go back to, I think I have slide 12 next. So these are the traditional rate setting principles. Of course, you want to meet your annual revenue requirement, be financially stable, rates should be cost-based, and easy to understand, administer, all these things that we talk about. And then I like slide 13 because it really shows what we all know about providing electric service, and that is that pie chart on the left shows how, and this is specifically for Truckee Donner, this is how you're collecting your retail revenues, so 80% through energy charges. And then those 2 pie charts on the right-hand side, the top one is using the 100% demand methodology, and the bottom is the minimum system. So you can see how those different assumptions can change how much is in the customer component of the rate. But you see only 42% of the costs are actually energy related. I think, I don't know if I should pause there, if there's any questions or anything that I just went over before getting into the results.
Good? Good? Okay, we're good.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we can go to slide 15. So here is a summary of the revenue requirement. You see most, the largest line items, of course, are in your power supply costs, and of course your capital projects. And based on the 2022 budget, there's a 6.5% rate increase. I think that goes up to about 8% when you add in a transfer for the general fund. But in this slide deck, it's a little bit different. I apologize for that. But it still will show the results. On slide 16, this is looking out through 2025. So these are projected retail rate revenues at your current rates, and then also the forecast revenue requirement over the same time. And you can see that looking forward, you're going to need to continue with some rate adjustments into the future. And I should note that, again, the bottom row is rate changes over current rates. So we haven't built in any assumptions about any rate changes over this time period. Slide 17, this is the results based on the minimum system. The next slide will show the results for the 100% demand analysis. You guys, your previous COSA was a minimum system COSA. So this is probably more like what you might kind of lean toward in the future. So you're not making any big changes in methodology. So you can see that most classes need a rate increase. Let's see, what else can I say about this slide? I just want to note that when we do cost of service analysis, there's a lot of assumptions that go in as well. And so you can think about that rate change on the right-hand side, as there's an error band around that as well, like plus or minus 10%. So if we go to slide 18, you can see using the 100% demand methodology, residential customer rate increases are lower. In the previous slide, they were around 10%, and here they're 5.2. So again, most classes needing some sort of rate increase. Slide 19. We generally recommend that you would phase in larger rate changes over time. And then when you're doing larger rate increases, 8-10%, you might choose to minimize the structural changes in your rate design, just to protect those customers that might be impacted by both the structure change and your rates. Like if you increase your basic charge, if you double it, for example, even though the overall rate change might only be 8% or 9%, customers that don't use very much energy might see much larger bill impacts. So small changes often and gradual structure changes in your rates over time. Okay, so that's the COSA results section. I'll just pause here before going into the renewable rate analysis in case there's anything anyone wants to add or ask.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when doing these kind of rate studies for different companies, have you seen, this is a bit of sticker shock with it, are there any recommended efficiencies that you would give to the companies to kind of help balance out the increases that are needed?
Efficiencies, I guess I'm not really sure what you mean by that.
Lowering the expenses or,
Yeah, you know.
so it's not such a high percentage increase?
Yeah, you do have options of, you know, if you're willing to finance your capital projects over time, rather than having less of it come from rate-funded capital, that would certainly reduce that sticker shock, as you say.
Thank you.
I'm still digesting a little bit. I'm having deja vu to last year.
Well, I do have just one comment. This just kind of reinforces what Mike was saying last meeting. It's
This was the.
extremely important to get those early rate increases. You know, I think Tony last time was talking about 6%, 5%. With this just really reinforces not doing that. And, you know, Mike's already looking into taking, borrowing money for the capital projects. The capital project plan, the master plan is pretty robust and has a lot of projects to take care of. So that was it just reinforces that it's really important to get those small over what Tony was saying last time, pushing that early on, so.
Yeah, now I can see that it becomes more clear how valuable that is.
Right,
instead
because
of-
you're looking at a 22 or so or percent
Yeah.
increase out in the future if we only do that lower end based on the cost of service, so.
Yeah, I think it's important, perhaps for the presentation purposes, if we could return back to the forecast revenue requirement and provide a little bit more insight and explanation of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
And so could we go through this slide and explain what the rate change over current rates, a little bit more detail on what those percentages reflect?
Yeah, so the 2022 and 23, those are your budgeted revenue requirements. So if you, for example, raised rates as of January 1st, 2022, say you raise rates 6.5%. When you get to 2023, you're not going to have a 10% rate increase. It'll be less.
So these are reflecting it if we maintain the current rate
okay.
increases.
All right.
And so that's this is explaining the recovery you'll have to make in order to meet revenue
Universal
requirements.
sigh of relief
So-
there. Okay, I was looking at that as a year over year.
Sorry.
I just hope I reduced some of the sticker shock right there.
Okay.
I'm like, how did we get
Yeah.
here? I thought we just had a discussion about. Okay, thank you very much for stepping in before panic.
That was a very good clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad we went back to that.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, is there any other questions or thoughts before we move on to the renewable rate?
I don't think so, but we would, I guess this is from Mike, because last meeting we talked about different scenarios with the rate fiddling, and if we were going to get to see any, now that we understand what the future looks like if we don't address rates.
So this presentation is for the purposes of showing the rate cost of service analysis.
Okay.
In the budget process, Mike's going to go over a couple of scenarios, and then the board will have an opportunity at the public hearing for electric rates to actually approve and adopt our rate structure moving forward.
Okay.
And so
Well,
this
obviously-
presentation is about the cost of service analysis and how to take that data to apply it to
To the budget.
a future rate structure.
Okay, I'm good. Cool.
Okay. So I think we can go to slide 21. So Joe asked us to look at what others are doing. What are your neighbors doing for 100% renewable energy rate option? So those customers that want to opt up and purchase 100% renewable energy. So we looked at some of your neighbors, City of Palo Alto, Alameda, and that's what this table is showing. Most of them have some sort of option for 100% renewable, and it's most typically a surcharge on their otherwise applicable tariff. So you can buy it in a block, or you can just say, depending on the program, I want all of my purchases to be 100% renewable, and it's a $1 per kWh charge. The price varies somewhat, usually around it looks like it's 0.2 to 2 cents per kilowatt hour pricing for 100% renewable energy. Keeping in mind, of course, that these utilities are already purchasing a share of renewable energy for their base power supply. So we thought we would take a look at Turkey Donner's power supply and see, based on what your cost structure is, how could we design a 100% renewable rate, and what should we base that on? So slide 22, here's a summary of what power costs look like in 2019. So average cost for your system, about that $64.66 number, probably seen that before. And then also we have it by resource as well in this table. Let's see. On slide 23, we looked at the renewable options in your portfolio as it stands. So one, of course, is the landfill resource. And the average cost we looked at over a period of 4 years, 2016 to 2020. And averaging those costs, because the costs from year to year vary based on the output and some other factors for those resources. So we looked at, what if you did landfill only? What if you did just your wind projects and tied your adder to those? Or what if you did a combination of wind and landfill? And that's what this table is showing. Based on this analysis, the recommendation was to go ahead and price it based on the landfill gas resource, because that's a base load resource, and it would be able to hypothetically meet those customers' energy demand needs. So the incremental cost, of course, is 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we just did an analysis here on this page. We said, well, what if 1% of all your customers participate in this program? We see in the CCA world somewhere around 1 to 5% maybe participation in a 100% green energy rate. So we thought we'd start with, what does 1% look like for revenue impact? And so that's what this slide is showing. This is about 1.5% of your retail load, 1% of your customer count, and it would bring in an additional $50,000 per year that could be put toward buying additional renewable energy resources. That concludes the renewal portion. Are there any questions, or Joe, did you want to add anything, or Mike?
No, I would just add that details we can present based on board feedback. We'll for both the electric rate impacts, we can present that back in December based on your input tonight.
Okay.
And Mike's presentation with his options that he'll show.
Got it. So many things tonight. It's just the rates are, they're complex. You want, and there's so many different ways to, the green rate, time of use rates, are these going to get folded into, that's a tool. more, I guess, more for us to use with evening out our demand. Obviously, that wasn't part of this presentation.
Correct. Stephen Keats will talk a little bit about that
Okay.
in his presentation later.
Okay.
We had a different consultant analyze
Gotcha.
some things about time of use.
Yeah, I mean, this was pretty straightforward, and I get, it's a good place to start us thinking about the various things that we want to deploy to help our customers and ourselves get to the greenness that we want. Okay. Sorry, where am I? So is that the end of?
I have a few more
Okay.
slides really
Thank you.
quickly to wrap up.
That's what I wasn't sure where I was.
So if the board adopts rates for the future years, it would be adopted according to the following schedule. We would review the proposed electric utility rate increases and the new 100% green energy rate. That's tonight's action, tonight's discussion. And we're also recommending, of course, that the board would schedule a public hearing for proposed electric utility rate increases and a new 100% green energy rate for the December meeting. That's our recommended action also for tonight. And upon board approval to schedule that meeting, we would then hold a public hearing regarding proposed rates to get public input on December 1st. At the same time, we would would present, and the board would have an opportunity to consider an ordinance to increase electric rates and possibly adopt a new 100% green energy rate on the December 1st meeting. And then upon approval of that ordinances take 30 calendar days for them to be effective. So the rates would only then be effective, and the option for a green energy rate would only be available starting on the January 2nd and following going forward. So there's no fiscal impact, of course, associated with the item, the presentation of the item, but the fiscal impact of changes to electric rates and the possible addition of a new 100% green energy rate will be considered at a future board meeting. So the staff recommendation is to provide input to us on the cost of service analysis and the 100% green rate energy study, and also for the board to schedule a public hearing at the regularly scheduled district board meeting on December 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter for the purpose of receiving input on the adoption of proposed electric rate increases and a new 100% green energy rate. Thank you, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. First, I'm going to open it up to public comment. If we have received anything online, I don't see any, nobody else has joined us.
No, Madam President.
Thank you very much, which means it's back to us as the board. Do we have any clarity or questions or direction to staff in relation to the rates presentation we just received?
I like the green energy rate. I think that's pretty straightforward. Let people buy into it if they want to do it. And cost of service analysis for that was straightforward, so it's kind of an easy one for me to support. And then the cost of service for the rates, there it is. We have some background for it, for the rates, for the discussion on December 1st. And we did not have, I guess Mike didn't have the cost of service analysis prior to the last meeting, correct? Or you did?
Correct.
Oh, you did not? Okay. So there will be some adjustments then in that presentation to go over kind of the rates and the rate outlook and the smiley face or unhappy face.
Yeah, and if you can recall, in the previous presentations, the workshops for budget, we're looking at further out years. And so the presentations in the previous workshops, we're looking at the 10-year electric master plan and the financial master plan. This presentation is on a cost of service study for, I believe it was a two-year proposal, two-year rate structure. And so Mike will follow up on some of his presentations on what that looked like and how it carries out over the full master plan. So you can make a decision in December for what, rate increases you want to adopt over the next couple of years. So there's a little bit of misalignment there in terms of the study versus the long-term financial plan, but Mike will be able to draw some analogies across that 10-year period.
To knit that together for us. I think also as the board, we should keep in mind that this is kind of a moving target. We can look at our electric rates as often as we want to. Is that, it doesn't have to be tied to the budget cycle every 2 years. I mean, obviously, we look at it much more closely every 2 years, but I feel like if we introduce a new green rate, we have an adjustment that apparently is overdue for our electric rates coming up. And if we start thinking about things like time of use rates, if we start thinking about things like EV charging rates, I have a feeling that a lot is going to come at us here, that we may be fiddling with our rates quite a bit over the next 5 years or so. And it's not, we can adjust in lots of different directions if we need to, right? So what we decide tonight, or more importantly at the next meeting where we're adopting the rates, we don't have to be, oh my gosh, we're setting something in motion and we're going to get year after year, 10, 20, 40% rate increases. I think we can not have to get too anxious about it. Is that an appropriate assessment? Is that accurate?
Well, I think Mike Salmon in his presentation tonight can help clarify some of those things with some different scenarios for rate increases and the impact that would have on future years to General Manager Wright's point. So
Okay.
to give some clarity to the board.
Great. 'Cause
Yeah, I think we discussed that, and it's definitely something we need to be, keep in mind that there are some assumptions in any projected plan, and no time more than now are a lot of those assumptions, volatile and unpredictable. So the market out there is unpredictable, regulatory requirements are unpredictable, and so this is providing some analysis on data we do have, and, the best plans moving forward. Staff will have a recommendation during the public hearing for a proposed rate structure, rate increases, and how many years to go out. And that'll be at the board's discretion, how far we want to carry those out. And there's a couple different philosophies, ways to approach that.
Okay, very good. And I'm sure it's not particularly efficient to change your rates every single year, but, I think we should allow ourselves to play it by ear a tiny bit. Okay. Does anybody have anything to add or subtract?
The only thing that kind of came out of this, that was, kind of spoke to me, is the 1% participation. I thought that was pretty low. So
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be a big part. If we choose to introduce a green rate, if that is our consensus, I think we need to
Promote it.
make sure that we get, as much deployment as we can. 1 to 5, I would like to hit, 10 out of that. And I think that we have allies in the community that can help us do that. Spread the word and get people to sign up and see how far we can push that. And people, the community will also have questions of what are they getting for that green rate, so that we should be really prepared to answer.
Definitely.
And I think that point's well taken, that perhaps in the future workshops, we can bring some industry data, some benchmarking on that, to really give us a better idea of kind of the industry metrics on.
Yeah, and how we help people understand, how are we spending that green rate money? Are we putting it right back into power purchases of just green energy? How do we guarantee that? Can we stretch it in different directions and look at things like battery storage? Does that count as green? There's still some things to be ironed out, or there's still some questions that we need to be prepared for, is what I would say. So that's going to be a discussion that I think Stephen Keats will be able to help us with as well. Okay. I'm good. Good? Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
I'll move staff's recommendation for the public hearing.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Very good. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Director Bender.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Yes.
President Finn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. Good job, everybody. Thank you. Okay. Oh, and we have now a public hearing. Wow. So we are now going to conduct a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 budgets. So we're going to conduct a public hearing and hopefully adopt Resolution 2021-21 approving the 2022-2023 budget as recommended by staff. So now I am opening the public hearing. Do we have any public participation in our public hearing this evening?
Not currently, Madam Finn.
Okay, thank
Maybe
you.
we could wait until after the presentation
Oh,
and
we
call
could.
for it again.
I think we should
Maybe.
do that. I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you. You're on, Mr. Salmon.
Thank you, President Finn. Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. So Budget 22 and 2023 public hearing. Just for background, we have had 3 workshops previously with the board that were open to the public and noticed as regular board meetings. Tonight is a special public hearing on the same subject, and that's what I'm going to go over tonight. Included in the posted agenda packet for this item were 7 attachments that detail the various components for the budget. The public hearing was also advertised twice in the Sierra Sun newspaper. So I'm going to go over some. Tonight, I'm going to go over a bit of an introduction overview and then changes since the last workshop to the budget numbers. Briefly go over budget summary and operating expenses, personnel. We're going to get into rates. Excuse me. Segueing from our previous agenda topic, as well as the financial master plan. There is, this slide to the right, the pie chart is to remind everyone that there are a lot of moving parts and pieces to a balanced budget. And so trying to balance all those pieces at a reasonable rate is important to protect the district and its operations as well as the customer. The district has, as everyone in the room knows, adopted a mission and values that are important to not deviate from these in our budget preparations and the numbers. We also have strategic goals. And we have strategic initiatives as well. And those strategic goals and initiatives have been incorporated to the best of our ability in this current draft budget, based on the information we know today. Changes since the last workshop on October 20th, we have added 1 additional position in the district's personnel, a second troubleman position. And then I adjusted the amount of utilization of capital reserves by $500,000 to get the operating reserve as our priority back toward the 50% level of achievement. On the water side, miscellaneous expense adjustments for a netted $23,000 increase. I think that was primarily refining overheads. The bane of budget. This page here summarizes the 2022 budget as compared to the current budget that we're operating under. A lot of moving parts and pieces. You'll note that revenues are 14% greater than the 2021 budget, and that's a combination of customer growth as well as the utilization trend of kWh volume of usage of electricity, as well as the recommended rate increase for 2022. Costs have also increases, and I'm going to dive into that next. And on the non-operating side, capital expenditures are quite a bit more than the previous year's budget. And we've covered that in previous workshops. That does include $6 million for a new building at the Courtyard, which would be part of, would be funded through a new debt issuance if executed. And then it also includes $4.5 million for improvements to, renovation improvements to this building as drafted. The new bond proceeds is shown there that offsets part of that capital cost for the new building. That new building was in the 2021 budget as well, not at the same dollar level, but it was anticipated in the 2021 budget, but those funds were not expended. And there's a significant drawdown in the capital reserves because of the buildup of capital reserves because of less capital spending the last 2 years, in particular due to COVID impacts. This next page shows 2022 and 2023, showing the change from 2022 to 23 as well. This slide takes the 22 budget and just puts it in a sources and uses format. On the left is sources, on the right is uses, and I believe you have your handout, so you can look at it later. I'm not going to go over it in detail now. Purchase power is 30% of the electric uses of funds. 36% is capital in 2022's budget. Total sources and uses are at 46 million. So big budget year. Similar information for water. The capital side is driven primarily by the capital improvement plan that was adopted several months ago, almost a year ago, about a year ago, actually. So the board's well conversed in that. The rates have been approved. This is in alignment with those revenues are in alignment with those rate change expectations, and expenses I'm going to cover next. So there was a significant increase both in water and electric's operating expenses, so I included a few slides here. Some of them I'll go over, some I will not, but it's important to not just take for any company, not to just year over year, every year in budget preparations, just take the past year's budget and roll it to another budget. You know, just taking the previous budget. Well, that's what I budgeted last year, so I want it this year. So that's dangerous and can be a cause for escalation in costs. So I took a kind of a 30,000-foot view of what was a 3-year average of operating expenses, and then rolled forward the key drivers and changes from that 3-year average that we knew about for 2022. And I've covered this in previous workshops, but this summarizes that on one page, again, for this public hearing to quantify the drivers from a 3-year average to get to the current draft budget for electric. On the next slide, I did the same thing, but more granular on just what we call accounts payable, your vendor invoices, so excluding all the payroll changes and overhead related to payroll, just diving in on the vendor expenses, things that hit operating expenses from a vendor standpoint, and these were the things that bubbled up for that analysis. And then on the next page, I did the same thing for the water. And really, in summary, we didn't just take budget to budget. That's important for everyone to understand. We looked at what actual costs are being incurred, and then which I've talked about numerous times, the drivers for 2022 that are incremental cost and what those quantify to. The vast majority of those driven by the strategic plan, syncing with the strategic plan. I threw in a couple of slides here for the personnel on page 22. Current, with the addition of the troubleman position added since the last draft, we're at a recommended budget of 81.5 full-time equivalents for 2022's budget.
I wanted to add just a kind of a side note on this slide when it comes to the personnel and full-time equivalents. Obviously, the two additional were approved for already earlier this year. But in terms of the overall budget and the additional FTEs, this is for budgetary purposes. Staff will be bringing back to the board for approval, the justification for these positions, where they will be in the salary schedule, and a little more detail that we would typically do during additional positions. This is for budgetary purposes. Once staff has prepared job descriptions, justification for the additional positions, and the proposed wage salary schedule, that'll be brought back to the board for consideration and approval. So this is really, I didn't want the board to think this is the last time you're going to see this. This is for budgetary purposes, but it will require final approval, so you'll have another chance to review each of those positions.
Placeholder.
Since the FTE, thank you, Brian. Also, since the FTE presentation in previous workshops, we also added organizational chart information in attachment 5, the back section of attachment 5. So that covered operating expenses and personnel. I want to talk a lot more about rates, continuing on with our previous agenda topic. So 2017 was the first rate increase since 2009 for electric rates. It's important for everyone to remember. We talked about the green rate. We're kind of middle of the pack based on 2020's rates that we was the last available information out of some annual reports and other sources as far as where our current rates were for other comparable electric utilities. We do know that Liberty has requested over a 40% rate increase and in their most recent rate filing. The 2022, so one of the concepts that I think is important to understand is that the budget has an expectation on a rate change. The COSA rate study, as previously discussed at the previous agenda item, it dives into the detail of that rate study. Does it really make sense? Is it really what you need? It also looks into what she called allocation, Amber called allocation, as far as equitable distribution between your classes of customers. So devil's in the details. That's the COSA rate study. The budget just expects 8.5% increase in revenues as one big bucket of revenues. And so as long as the approved rate increase hits around 8.5% in overall revenue increase, we'll be in sync. If the approved rates are 7% overall, and then when you do the math on how much each customer and by their demand and their types are going to pay, then we'll have a gap that would be a problem to balance a budget. It'd be difficult to balance a budget. So that's how I see the synchronicity between the two. So what is quantifying? One method of quantifying a rate increase is looking at what does it do to the average customer. That's what's on this screen. Our average residential customers would have a increase of about $7 over 2021. Secondary rate taxpayer would have about an $8 increase with an 8.5% increase. And again, that depends on, the real increase will depend on whether it's all in a KWH charge or a lot of it's in their monthly customer service charge, those type of dynamics. And if there's any shift between commercial and residential based on the COSA rate study. So taking that a little further, an 8.5% increase in a primary customer's average bill at 500 kWh per month would be a compounded growth rate of 2.3% over the last 10 years. Because remember, a lot of those years were 0%. So this slide is putting in perspective, while it is a large increase, larger than average increase for 2022 being recommended, when you look at it over time, it's not nearly as great. And that has had ramifications to the district as well, and I'll get into that when we get into the financial master plan. Everybody follow that? 2.3% and 2.1 last 10 years. Another metric to understand is if for every 1% change in revenue expectations, that's about a $284,000 impact on 2022. What's also important to understand is it has a ripple effect in the out years, because if you don't do it now, you pay later. And so by lowering an increase now, it has a ripple effect, in particular on your reserves going forward. So we'll cover that in the financial master plan slides. And then water rates have been approved. My understanding is currently while we're planning beyond 2 years, the electric rate recommendation for approval on December 1st would be for a 2-year period. That may change by the time we get there, but that's my current understanding of the game plan. To President Finn's comments earlier that there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of moving parts, and we can't go too far. While we can plan further out, approval would be probably seeking just for the next 2 years, 2022 and 23. Okay, next, financial master plan. This summarizes on one slide the current recommended rate change and what it does to the all-important reserve balances. I've color-coded this as well if it's between 100% or over of the goal of reserves, then it's green. If it's yellow, it's in the 90s. And if it's below 90%, it's in the pink, also known as salmon color. So the recommendation is the first section at the top. A couple of other scenarios are leveling that down a little bit, and you can see you have more pink, which means you're below, you're on radar with your reserve balances for a longer period of time. And then scenario 2 is getting more aggressive with rate changes of 8.5 in the first 2 years. What does that look like visually on a chart? That's the next page. And you know, it's over $1 million in some cases, but it doesn't show up as that great on this slide as far as the gaps. But you're truly not at your reserve balances until mid 26, 27. But you're not in terrible shape as compared to some other companies. With the water utility is certainly not nearly as close to the goals currently. The water utility is forecasted to get out there in, I believe it's fiscal year 31. That's coming up in the next slide here. So I added a couple slides that I don't think are in your presentation packets because I had them today, but it's the same information. I just added these in the very center, in scenario 1, you'll see this just quantifies the total reserve balance difference. So after year 2, you're 1.1 million less in reserves compared to the reserve balance that's recommended based on the rate recommendation. If you did 6.5 and 6.5, and scenario 2, which is more aggressive, scenario 2, which is more aggressive, you're actually 600,000 greater in reserve balance. I should not have touched that screen. Then I added scenarios 3 and 4 and 5, and the reason for that in particular was a scenario 5. I think you can see that on the screen. So that in all of these scenarios, the 10-year average rate increase, if you add up all the rate increases and divide by 10, you get 3.8%. Okay? But it makes a huge difference in whether you front load that or spread it over time. This very bottom one is spreading it over time. Okay, the average is for the 10 years is 3.8, so let's do 3.8 every year. That would be a very negative impact on the district, because while the revenues at the very end are right at the same on a year-by-year basis, but you're not getting it until the very last year. And so by front-loading it with the current recommendation to in part make up for the times that you did not raise rates and kept them flat at 0 for quite a few years, you need to do that, is what's part of the recommendation. So in this scenario 5, you have almost 20 million less in reserve balance than if you front load it a little bit now. So pay me now or pay me later, but if you just did straight line 3.8 for the next 10 years, you will not have nearly the reserves that your district code recommends. That's the point of that slide.
And that's important to show that slide in the cost of service study, that's what that was reflecting in terms of the rate increases down the road that would be required to recover that revenue. So that was an important slide.
Yes, thank you, Brian. And those out years, that's exactly what it's trying to show. Thank you. This is the financial master plan's results for water with the current rate approvals and estimations thereafter, with an aggressive capital improvement plan based on the aging infrastructure of the water system and the cost of doing those improvements. As far as fiscal impact, staff is recommending approval of the fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 budgets as presented, aligned with district's mission, values, and strategic plan. The budget approval will affect the district's expenditures and resulting revenue requirements for the upcoming next 2 years, 2022 and 2023. To the extent new debt is planned, this impacts 20 to 30 years into the future. Now, by approving this budget, you don't approve a bond issue or anything like that. It's still any particular project, and whether we debt finance or go a different route or use the water, state water resolving funds, project funds, or those type things. Those are all yet to be determined, but it's a plan. The budget is a plan. It's a game plan, and as you know, things do vary from that. So that concludes my presentation on Budget 22 and 2023 as part of conducting a public hearing regarding the subject. And then we do have a resolution to adopt, recommend the board adopt a resolution 2021-21 approving the fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 budget as recommended by staff. A little over 15 minutes.
All right, well, very nice. Thank you, Mike, once again, for giving us a lot of information, responding with things we asked for the last time, so we can see what the future might look like. And I guess probably now would be a good time to open it up to public comment, now that they've had a chance to digest all that.
There is none, thank you.
And there is none. Okay, very good. Which brings me back to the board, or do I close the public hearing? I
Yes, you can close the public hearing.
Okay, the hearing is now closed. But the directors are still, are still here. Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts about our last, most current understanding of what's going to be going on in the budget for the next 2 years?
Yes, I do. So if we go back to slide number 18, electric utility operating expenses. Sorry, it's a few ago. Can you help me understand the $1.125 million strategic initiatives? And kind of break that down a little bit more. Because if we add up all the strategic initiatives for the water and electric, we're up to $3.7 million.
Yes, so Director Harris, I can detail, you'd like more information on these items on this page? Sure.
And actually, for anything that says strategic initiatives.
Yes.
These are newly added to the budget?
Yes, we covered this in previous workshops, but I'm happy to cover it again. The 311 and strategic initiatives vendors. So the 160,000 of that is undergrounding broadband, is for undergrounding broadband, 100% clean renewables and local generation professional services. Yet to be determined what the breakdown is, whether it's split evenly a quarter, or all on one of those initiatives. But we need to have something in the budget if we want to be able to afford it, was the concept. And so
Correct.
the placeholder was $160,000.
I was just actually surprised to see it over 4 pages, and over the 4 pages, they add up to over $3 million. Am I doing my calculations correct?
It sounds about, I haven't added that specific
So for the
item up.
the 4 strategic initiatives that we passed earlier, you guys are wanting us to budget $3.7 million towards those initiatives.
No, I guess that's a slightly mislabeled strategic plan might be the better for all of that. Strategic initiatives of the 4 that I just referenced is $160,000 of the 311 in electric.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, under the strategic plan, there's goals. And so with probably the initiative term there should be more all-encompassing. So, for example, the vegetation hazard analysis fits under one of our goals of environmental stewardship and wildfire mitigation. And so each of these are within a strategic goal and/or an initiative.
Yeah, every single budget item will
Yes.
fall under one of those.
So they're all strategic planned. The 160 is specific to the strategic initiatives of the 4 board initiatives for renewable power, et cetera.
Yeah, so that's just a beginning.
Correct.
Things that we will be able to use to make more informed choices as we move forward with those initiatives. Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments?
A lot of workshops, so it's good.
Absolutely.
A lot of
There's a lot
data. It's nice being here at the end with the public hearing and getting to the end game for our budget for the next 2 years. So, and then I think I like Mike's recommended rates, but that's not for tonight. That's, right, we're just approving the budget. And these slides are part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by approving the budget, that approves From my perspective, as I understand it, it approves a total level of expenditures, personnel level. It approves a revenue expectation, but that's not to say that the board couldn't make a decision to vary from that going forward. In particular, on December 1st, there may be new information or different information that you make a decision to change rates to 9% or 8% or 7%. And then you have to wrestle with, okay, we just approved a rate change that is not in alignment, not in sync with the budget we just approved, so we'll have to do a budget adjustment accordingly. Do we dip into reserves, which we're already trying to balance, and let it ride, or do we do other things?
Right.
Cut out a particular strategic initiative or plan for something less. So you have those options at the board's pleasure, really. So we don't do anything without over $15,000 without bringing it to the board, so.
Have some stops there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
I know this is definitely a lot of work, and I do really appreciate, because it's complicated, there's a lot to it, and everything. I know this, you didn't go over this tonight in this presentation, but in the packet, there were the org charts. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that Human Resources is going back with the general manager as a strategic partner as the management team. So I was happy about that. And I also noticed that the facilities is going to be one of your responsibilities in going under you there. Out of curiosity, how many current employees do we have? I know I ask that question every once in a while. Currently employed.
I do not have that specific number, Director Harris. I wouldn't want to guess.
Okay. Okay. I know we lost one tonight because
Had one
Steve
retire, I can tell you
retired. Exactly. And then I also asked at the last meeting efficiencies. Are there any efficiencies that were identified as part of this budget where we could save money?
I know that I refined things kind of based on those slides that I went over that took the 3-year average. At a detail level, that was a tool I used to kind of isolate where I could drop. Don't budget that amount, and we haven't spent that in the last 3 years. So the average is running lower, let's budget something lower. So I did that in a lot of places, going over the details with the various directors of the various operations. I also find that the district seems to do that as items are going to come up, because typically those larger items, we're struggling to achieve that item, and it's going to have to go before the board. We're getting RFPs, and there's a process of thinking about, is there a way we can do this item better? Is there a way we can execute on this particular, still achieve the same maintenance level for whatever item it might be, but is there a better way to go about it? So I see that happening kind of on an ongoing basis throughout the district as individual projects come up.
Definitely. And I also noticed, it is a very heavy capital and very aggressive with capital. The positions I saw didn't appear to kind of help with the capital projects and with managing those capital projects. That's just kind of an outgoing comment to you. And seeing an additional position added after last meeting. So also with a person vacating another position. So it's just noted.
Right. Duly noted. I think there is perhaps some ripple effect. Those additions will potentially create bandwidth that otherwise would not be there because of the lack of those positions in the past. Most of these positions have been talked about well before I was here, from my sense of the conversations. I don't know if Director or General Manager Wright would like to touch on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think these are great questions. It's important to kind of separate a couple of things. One, on the aggressive capital replacement program is definitely going to be heavily, intensify engineering workload. And so we're working on a staffing plan for the electric engineering group. And then one of the other options we have and what we utilize typically on the water side is engineering consulting services, because they tend to be more specific. And so our engineering staff has great baseline utility expertise, but some of those needs are more specific. So for example, we're working on a board-approved project to build a new pump station. Some of that engineering services is outside of our specific expertise in-house, and so we look to bring in, for that turnkey project, pump stations, substations, et cetera, is to look for outside resources, because there are some efficiencies built into that as well. And our focus in terms of additional staff is to address some of the operational needs that either we haven't had the staff in the past to do, or they're, through regulatory compliance, becoming more heavily prioritized. So for instance, the facilities staff FTEs that are proposed to be added over the next budget cycle is to address some of the facilities maintenance issues that we have either an option of outsourcing those completely, but in terms of creating efficiencies internally, it's important that we add that staff that can manage those programs. On the water side, we have testing and maintenance requirements that are coming up on the regulatory front, and we need those internal staff to develop those expertise for water testing, water loss, and our water use performance standards that are coming out. Same thing on the electric side. You've heard nothing over the last 2 years but vegetation management, line clearing, in bolstering and improving our infrastructure. So the additional line crew is going to be doing a lot of that pole work that we need to do, and managing some of that vegetation management programs. So while we're always striving for efficiencies, one of the things in this budget cycle is we're proposing adding some internal positions to, one, manage those programs, and two, have boots on the ground, so to speak, so that we can effectively meet those additional requirements for all the utilities.
Did you have any more questions? Are you good with the?
No, I saw actually the one position that is getting taken away is a half of a electrician. So I just thought that was interesting. Are they, out of curiosity, are they going to be moved over to the water side as part of those electrician FTEs, or?
We did discuss in some of the earlier workshops that one of those is a net zero, net effect move, transfer over from the electric side to the water side. The water utility operations budget has funded 1.5 FTEs of electrician staff historically for the SCADA project. That project is sunsetting here in the next couple of months. Staff does have in the budget right now the reduction of the electric utilities group. That has been something that's been in discussion for the last 3 to 5 years. We were approached by IBEW 1245 to reconsider some of those adjustments. So there is a note in the budget, in both I believe the org chart and the actual budget line item, that staff will be working with IBEW over the next couple of months. There are some proposals out there that we are considering, and we'll bring a board item back later in probably the second half of 2022 for potentially a budget adjustment or a kind of a structure adjustment in terms of where those classifications reside long-term.
Thank you. I do appreciate all your work. I know it's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. Well, I guess that leaves me, and I actually don't have any questions. I think you have given me a lot of information. Just in general, thoughts on budgets and money and balancing. Sometimes businesses grow, and that's a good thing. And you add employees, and you expand your services, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. We budget for it, and we adjust for it, and we continue to grow and provide the service that our community is accustomed to. And I also, looking at the rates and the potential increases that we have, another way to think of these things, these are investments. We're not just spending money. We're doing it because we have goals that we as a community need to achieve. And front-loading it is smart. You know, if I just had this discussion with my daughter, whom, oh my gosh, she's only 19, and she's starting a retirement account, and she's front-loading it with $2,000, and I'm like, kiddo, you're going to be so grateful that you did this to your own self, you know, when you're 55. It's just going to make her life a lot easier. And that's because she's looking ahead and she's making the investment, and she's not being foolish like her mother was at her age. So, you know, these things, it's, you know, budgets just need to balance. That's really it. And I don't think the amounts necessarily should raise our eyes or be, you know, this is what it is. We offer a service, we get paid for it, and we create a better community through what we do here. And you have to spend money to do that. And we're not reckless, and it's good to see that in print. So thank you very much for all of your presenting that you've been doing. And I think that's it. I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I'd like to adopt Resolution 2021 approving the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 budget as recommended by staff. And we've conducted the public hearing.
Indeed, we have. Do we have a second? I'll second it.
Yeah, I'm struggling. Part of me is bummed that we have two of our board members gone for such an important meeting, and
I agree. I would have appreciated, but
I would have almost.
It's health
I mean, the public hearing is fine, but adopting the full budget, I almost wish we could postpone it for one.
well, if it makes
For one
a
meeting.
difference, I did speak with Director Laliotis and asked him if he had any concerns or things he wanted me to bring up, and he did not. We did discuss specifically about the budget, so not that, you know, that's not official anything, that's just a conversation. But he was, didn't think that there were no red flags to him or questions that were unanswered. Well, sure, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Director Bender.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Yes.
President Finn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Which brings us to the consent calendar portion of our evening. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
No, Madam President.
Very good. Does any board member want to pull something or have some questions about the consent calendar this evening?
I do not.
Okay, I do not either. Okay, in which case, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
And could we get a vote, please?
Director Bender.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Yes.
President Finn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right on. Okay, which brings us to our workshop this evening. A workshop on conservation and sustainability programs that the board is going to have the opportunity to provide feedback and direction to staff on our current and future conservation and sustainability programs. I'm very excited for this evening. I've been looking forward to it for a while. So it's a pleasure to meet you in person, and I'm excited to hear your workshop.
I think it's important before Stephen start that I introduced Stephen Keats. We're very happy to have him on board. He's been with us a while, and I know this presentation has been much anticipated. Hope he can live up to the, sorry. But we're happy to have Stephen on board as our conservation and sustainability program manager. Stephen.
Good evening, President Finn and the board. It's great to finally be here. I remember having conversations with General Manager Wright and Mr. Horvath back in June, I believe, about this. And for various reasons, it's taken us till today. But I think that's good in some ways because it's given me a chance to, I think, start gaining a little bit of momentum with the department, with the programs. As we're going to talk about in this presentation, there's been a lot of changes, and our programs have had to adapt to to a lot of the evolving framework for conservation and now decarbonization. So the presentation tonight will hopefully be a little bit more rich with material because of that. To start with a little quick introduction about the personnel in our department. We're a mighty department of 2 people. Myself, I spent 12 years on the dark side as a consultant, utility consultant. My background is mechanical engineering, and my kind of area of expertise was energy research, energy efficiency research, and specifically evaluation, measurement, and verification, EM&V. I am joined by Ms. Linda Peddleton, and she has been with the district for 7 years, and she's been in Truckee for much longer. She keeps the cogs working and the rebates turning. She's been wonderful to have, and I'm excited to see how she grows and hopefully how our department can grow over the next years. So. To start with, I figured it would be helpful if we kind of take a step back and look at the history of conservation, and not just for the utility, but for California in general. A lot of it was really started back in the 90s with AB 1890, and that kind of started the surcharge. That was earmarked specifically for energy conservation. There was some subsequent legislation that described, put kind of boundaries on how those funds were to be spent, specifically like equitability requirements, et cetera. This is grossly simplified. There's been significant, legislation and evolution over time. But I think the important point here is that the PUD, the district, has been participating. We've been doing conservation since the beginning, the key drivers for these programs is one, certainly legislation, but I think the more maybe important drivers are going to be our own internal goals and values. And then secondly, the community's values and the community's interests. And I think that it's quite clear that specifically on the community side, values and interests have changed significantly since 1996 in the areas of conservation. A lot of that due to education, but a lot of it also due to just more and more awareness and more understanding and increasing data showing us what's actually happening on the ground. I think one kind of interesting thing to point out is back in the 90s when these programs were initially started, the CPUC actually had a very specific rulemaking in place to prevent things like fuel substitution, converting from gas to electric, because at that point in time, they were very worried that there would be these wars between utilities, specifically like SoCalGas and Edison, and they wanted to kind of stave that off. Recently, within the last couple of years, some of those rulemakings have changed because of interest in beneficial electrification, decarbonization, and so now there is more of a push, and there are mechanisms now for us to be able to provide incentives for customers to switch from gas to electricity. To bring it a little bit more now to home, I tried to go back into what data that I could find to look at what our own load growth has looked like over time. And so this plot shows the annual KWH sales. Going all the way back to 1990. And the little gray line up there, that's the impact that our conservation programs have had. And I'll point out that that's actually a fairly conservative number up there because we didn't really start doing EM&V, measuring our impacts until 2008. So there's a lot of impacts that we had previous to 2008 that I don't have good data for. So that's a pretty conservative number. I think that one thing to kind of take away is that The conservation activities during this period were fairly focused on what I would call traditional energy efficiency measures, and a lot of it was focused on lighting. We did a stellar job here in Truckee getting incandescent light bulbs out of town. At this point, if I was to go out and give somebody an LED, they'd be replacing another LED, or they just put it in a closet with a bunch of other LEDs. So, we've done a great job there. The flip side to that is now we have to dig deeper to find energy efficiency opportunities and conservation opportunities here in Truckee. And that's one of the parts that's evolving. That's one of my challenges here coming in and reimagining these programs. I think that the final factor that I want to talk about here, looking back, is that previously conservation programs, and not just here, but across the board, were very focused on just conservation. That was their goal. That was their metric. That was it. And even still today, some utilities across the country dislike these types of programs because they see them as kind of contrary to their business model. We're paying our customers to purchase fewer of our widgets. Why would we do that? But over time, most utilities have understood, have learned that there's actually mutual benefits. This isn't just a strange thing, anti-business thing. That we actually gain certain benefits by engaging in these types of programs. And so part of the challenge in running these programs is identifying how can we design those benefits into these programs so that not only are we benefiting our customers, but we're also, doing good from a business perspective, and find where we can overlap. Okay, so how are we going to do that? To start with, we got to look at what are the inputs to these programs, and one of the big inputs would be what funding sources do we have? The primary funding source at this point are the public goods charge, which is 2.85% of our sales, KWH sales. However, recently we also now have access to the low carbon fuel standard credits, and we've been gaining those over the last couple of years, and those currently the funds that we currently have don't have significant restraints as long as we're spending them on electrification, transportation. Forthcoming, there will be constraints in terms of like equity constraints. But that's becoming a bucket, and that's a bucket that's going to be growing over time because it's tied to how many electric vehicles are registered here in Truckee. We are also exploring at this point potential grants on the water side of things. What's nice is that it's called the Water Energy Nexus. Every gallon of water takes a certain amount of KWH to produce. So in that sense, water conservation can also be framed as electric conservation. The difficulty, though, as we'll get to a little bit later, is that it's very difficult to make that cost-effective, and we'll talk about the cost-effective kind of parameters and constraints that we look at on the energy efficiency programs. And then with the funding, as I noted earlier, there are certain expectations that come with that funding, notably equitability expectations, and I think that that is also consistent with our own goals. As a community and as a public utility. And then finally, we want our programs to be cost effective, just a business sensibility about them. So continuing on the topic of cost effectiveness, because this is kind of a big component that I look at when I'm designing the programs, and this is also a metric that the CPUC looks at when it's looking at IRP utilities and IOU utility results from their programs. And there's different ways to kind of to look at cost effectiveness. We can look at, is it cost effective for a ratepayer? Is it cost effective for the participant, the person who's receiving the rebate? Is it cost effective for us, the utility? And is it cost effective for society in general? And as you can imagine, there can be some debate as to, well, what do you include as a cost? What do you include as a benefit? Thankfully, these tests in particular have kind of settled over because they're pretty consistent, well developed over the last few years. Although the CPC has recently kind of revamped the total resource cost test, which is kind of measuring societal benefit in light of the recent pushes towards decarbonization. But fundamentally, we're looking at benefits versus costs. And when I'm designing these programs and looking at our portfolio, it's a balancing act of how do where do we want to land. And some measures, some energy efficiency measures, they might not be cost effective. So water conservation measures might not be, from a numbers perspective, from these tests, cost effective. But we might deem them still necessary to achieve our own goals and purposes here locally. And we do have a little bit of flexibility to kind of define for ourselves, kind of take some of these tests, adjust them a little bit and define what we feel are benefits or costs that are consistent with our own circumstances. Okay, so that's kind of a 10,000-foot view of conservation, and apologize if I'm moving kind of fast. There's kind of a lot, but feel free to throw out any questions if I haven't covered something in enough detail. Now I'd like to just kind of shift gears into what are we doing. So that was kind of what are the considerations, what are the factors that go into this. Now I want to look at, okay, well, what are we actually doing? And what we're actually doing, I think, can be kind of broadly classified into two categories. One would be, what's the boots on the ground effort? What are we actually implementing and executing here locally in Truckee? The other category would be maybe more research-oriented or understanding-oriented, because we want to make sure that there's a feedback cycle. We want to make sure that when we're doing something, we're also getting feedback to make sure that what we're doing is effective, is useful, and that we're achieving or doing things that we think we're doing, right? And so we have the conservation decarbonization programs themselves, but we're also doing an electrification study, which Mr. Horvath had referenced earlier. And then I'm also trying to put together a little bit more of a robust analytical framework for us so that we can leverage kind of modern algorithms, modern computing, et cetera, to improve our efficiencies in how we're doing things and also increase our levels of understanding. So jumping into our current kind of boots on the ground efforts, and we're just starting to get these rolled out. I just have gotten a contract together to do our residential energy surveys. Those will be starting here in the next month or so, and that program was specifically identified as the one that we wanted to roll out with first, because one of the key objectives, which maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but is to funnel customers into these rebate programs. We want to not only help them identify how they can improve energy efficiency in their homes, improve their homes, teach them energy efficient behaviors, but we also want to identify opportunities for them to engage with our other programs as well. And our programs include both kind of our classic energy efficiency rebates, and then also now we're expanding to include smart electrification. So classic rebates would include stuff like Energy Star appliances, water efficient toilets, low flow shower heads, insulation, windows, et cetera. And actually, that's kind of as an aside, windows and insulation, really residential weatherization is one of the last, I think, untapped bastions for us here for energy efficiency locally, because historically we've not been able to tackle that with the fact that we're a predominantly gas-heated community, gas and wood, and so the limitations on our budget, that budget had to be spent on electric conservation, and those measures would not conserve electricity. However, with electrification, we're going to be pushing for heat pumps for homes and heat pump water heaters for homes. Once homes are heated electrically, now we can offer rebates for envelope improvements. So I'm excited about that opportunity there. We're also going to be including inductive cooktops and panel upgrades, and I'm also looking right now into what sort of smart infrastructure we can incentivize. Smart panels are a pretty new thing. There's not a lot of manufacturers out there yet. It's not very tested, but that's definitely a point of consideration, and I think it's going to become an important an important factor later on, and we're going to touch on that later in the presentation here. But electricity use it's becoming important for us to not only understand or conserve the amount, but also be able to understand and impact the time that it's being used. So it's amount and timing, and that's what the smart infrastructure would allow us to do. In addition to the rebates themselves, we're also, as I mentioned, doing the energy surveys. We're launching the residential energy surveys here this month, and I'm hoping to get a commercial energy survey program put together first quarter of next year, so we can start offering something similar to our commercial customers. I think one thing I'm pretty excited about here is that we just got approval to get a software called Remotely, and that will enable us to do remote energy audits for our customers, so that if our customers are concerned about COVID, or if there's another outbreak that prevents us from being able to go into customer homes, we can still do the surveys for our customers. We have a significant backlog right now because of COVID that we're attacking. So the Remotely is going to really help us out on that front. Another boots on the ground and really important, I think, program is our education programming. It's not conserving electricity or water or greenhouse gases in a direct sense, and it's not installing a piece of equipment that's going to be more efficient in its use of resources or prevent directly an individual from consuming a resource. However, it's going to teach behavioral changes. It's going to teach people how to live sustainably, and I think behavior itself is probably one of the final frontiers for us on the energy conservation side of things, and we have several education programs currently going. We have a partnership with SWEP, who locally engages with our schools. They do the trash-in shows, and they do environmental clubs and the science fairs. They are working with us to provide messaging, and I'm really excited to be working with Missy to develop some additional programming over the course of this next year, to really engage with the youth and teach them about sustainable living. I hear a lot of reports back that they have a strong impact on their parents. Their parents are always coming back up to Missy and complaining that they're no longer allowed to leave their lights on, or they're getting hit by their kids significantly. In addition to that, we also have the conservation garden out here, which needs a little bit of a facelift, and we've budgeted some money there to give it a facelift and hopefully bring it a little bit more back into the forefront, especially with some of the water conservation needs forthcoming. Let's see, I think that's later in the presentation. Okay. The last kind of boots on the ground effort that we have are going to be internal projects. And internal projects are really important because we need to exemplify the changes that we're trying to push, right? If we're asking our customers to live sustainably and be energy efficient, et cetera, well, we kind of have to exemplify that here. So we've identified several opportunities for us to engage in energy efficiency and decarbonization here at the district. One of the things that we can do, that we will be doing, I'm going to be working with our facilities department to get them certified as an energy manager, certified energy manager. That way they can look at our energy usage just here at the district, our buildings, et cetera, and constantly identify, well, why are we using energy here? How can we conserve? How can we maintain, et cetera. We will be doing an HVAC system audit. I've already, started working with the architect for the building refresh to see where we can integrate energy efficiency into some of the work that we're already doing, that we've already budgeted for. We also are looking at doing an audit for both the water system, just how can we improve our own internal efficiencies in water conveyance and in water pumping, et cetera, as well as we'll be partnering with the town and the airport board with a greenhouse gas benchmarking audit. And then finally, electrification of our own vehicles. We'd like to start with pool vehicles, and we've talked about installing chargers, et cetera. So, we've got a lot of ideas, and not enough time to do them all. Okay, so now transitioning to maybe the more of a research element. We have a current study, an electrification study. We're working with HDR consultants and we asked them to look at three specific things for us. One was what sort of resiliency opportunities do we have, and how can we improve our resiliency as a utility? What sorts of time of use rates might be appropriate or useful for us as a utility? And then what are the potential barriers to electrification for our customers? And maybe as an expansion on that, not just barriers, but what's the potential for electrification for customers? Are people already electrifying in some areas, and are there things that are preventing them to do so in others? We have draft reports from HDR for both the utility resiliency study and the time of use rate design study that are currently under review, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have on those. In particular, the utility resilience study, it is primarily focused on battery storage at a utility scale, which is, while useful, not the whole picture. So we requested them to go back and to give us some additional information for other technologies, for example, fuel cells, pumped hydro, et cetera. So I'm looking forward to getting some more from them on that. Time of use rate design is a very complicated subject in some ways, but simple in others. It can be really boiled down to behavior, because what its purpose is to influence the behavior of the customer. When are they purchasing their electricity? And the rate itself is designed to incentivize the customer to purchase electricity during certain hours of the day and not in other hours of the day. One of the challenges that we have when it comes to time of use rate design is that our load profile is already fairly flat relative to other utilities. We don't have significant peaking in the summer for HVAC, for example. And that's usually the primary focus for time of use. So we asked HDR to look at some other more, and be a little bit more creative. Are there other reasons why we might want to incentivize customers to shift their load usage? And we asked them to look at EV rates. Does it make sense to try and load shift for EV charging, as well as trying to integrate solar production into time of use, have a time of use rate for solar customers. So we're currently reviewing those draft results, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more to present maybe at a later date there. When it comes to the electrification study, we have a survey at this point ready for our residential customers that I'd love to get out there. But recently we were approached by a company called Adviso, and I think, yep, that's the next slide. They are a behavioral research company, and they provide a service called home energy reports. The idea behind the home energy report is to provide the customer with information about their own energy consumption, as well as the energy consumption of their what they would deem their peers, either their neighborhood or the community as a whole. It's kind of up to us to define what comparators we'd like in those reports. But the goal is to give them a social incentive to reduce their energy use. It kind of turns it into a competition in some ways, and it allows them to kind of shift some of their behaviors to conserve energy or water. So Adviso approached us because they had a grant to do some pilot studies with utilities, so we went ahead and we're partnering with them. They're going to provide the energy reports, as well as help us conduct research and better understand the energy use behaviors of our customers. One of the things that is included in this is a virtual home energy audit. And that virtual home energy audit will ask the customers certain questions about their home and their energy use behaviors and their daily patterns, coupled with the electric utility billing data. And it will generate specific recommendations for the customers in terms of how they can save electricity or water. I'm hoping to work with them to pair that with the survey, that residential survey I mentioned earlier, to collect some additional data from our customers so that we can understand some of the barriers that they might be experiencing towards conservation or electrification. And that way we can take that data, that information, and craft our programs accordingly to try and eliminate or remove some of those barriers. So more to come on this one. Finally, with our current initiatives, we're trying to develop a robust analytical framework. And what I mean by that is we're bringing in modern statistical analysis and computational tools to allow us to crunch the copious amounts of data that we now have on the electricity and the water consumption for all of our customers. And integrate that with other data that we know about our customers, so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on. When are people using electricity? Why are they doing so? And how can we then take that and apply that to our programs moving forward? The nice thing is this kind of ripples as well into some of the other departments, because it will enable us to automate certain things like reporting. We can have reports automatically generated, which would enable them to be generated more frequently. And it would also relieve resources in certain ways, because now, individuals who were, previously required to spend a lot of time just trying to wrangle spreadsheets, no longer need to do that. They can focus their efforts in other places. It would also improve our ability to just manage clerical errors, since everything would be, systematic. So that's where we're at right now in terms of what is being done currently. We're also looking at the same time into the future. We're forecasting what are the needs going to be 5 years from now, and that's been an important consideration in all of our program design, because we want to make sure that we're not reacting after the fact. We want to make sure that our programs are designed such that we're ready for changes in the market, we're ready for changes in technology, et cetera. So one of the things that we're trying to do is build a framework that looks at not only the amount of a certain resource, be it electricity or water, but we also want to look at the timing of that resource. So the hour of the day that's being consumed, because the cost of electricity, the cost of natural gas, the cost of even a greenhouse gas emission, it varies over time. The cost of electricity in the middle of the day, when the sun is up and all of the solar panels are generating, is going to be a lot less than what it's going to cost at night. So we want to take that all into account when we are designing the programs, when we're looking at what are the real world impacts that these programs are going to be having on our customers, on our rates, et cetera. That also, I think, dovetails into conversations about resiliency. Solar is here; it's growing. And what comes with it are both positive and negative things. There are a lot of impacts that it has on our grid management, as well as on rate design, that we need to start figuring out how we're going to deal with. The graph here is an example of what's called a duck curve, which shows the impact that solar generation is having on the load shapes of the utilities over time. This is just kind of one utility, this is kind of an average. And you can see over the years how solar has become more and more pervasive, right? It's having a much, much larger impact. In 2013, there was really hardly any impact, but then, now we're down at the bottom in 2020, there's this significant drop during the day. Well, that's awesome. That's a lot of renewable resource electricity that's being generated. However, that ramp at the very end presents a very real problem for generators, because that's a significant amount of load that has to instantaneously be provided once the sun goes down. And so the only way that they can do that is by having base load generators, like natural gas generators, idling during that time period so that they're ready to fire up. And that's a lot of greenhouse gases that are being emitted to leave those on idle. So is there a better way for us to do this? Is there a way for us to design our grid, our programs for our customers to reduce the amount of idling that's happening, to account for this duck curve? One of the things that the analytical framework I talked about earlier is going to be earmarked for is to start really understanding the time of use energy for our customers. What are, we call them load shapes. What are some of the load shapes that for our customers? And not only the overall load shape for like a residential home, but the various end uses for that residential home. When is their water heater using electricity? When is their heating system using electricity? When are their lights using electricity, et cetera? And there's been a lot of recent activity on that front. The National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, they did a pretty significant study over the last couple of years to develop load shapes at a national level for residential and commercial, and it was a pretty cool project. And I was fortunate enough to be able to participate on the advisory board, technical advisory board for that project, and it came up with a lot of really good stuff. But I'd love to be able to take the results from that and apply them here locally in Truckee. We have a very unique community. We buck the curve in so many different ways that national load shapes, national anything aren't really directly applicable to us. So we need to take what we've learned there and apply them here, and that's what we hope to do. So, in conclusion. Conservation, while that was where we started, and it was a great place to start, that's no longer our singular aim. We've, I think, grown, we've evolved over time, and our focus now, I think it's probably safe to say, is more on the overall demand side of the meter. And how are we going to integrate the demand side of the meter, the customer side of the meter, with the utility side? How are those two going to work together? Become integrated such that we can achieve our various climate and greenhouse gas reduction and conservation goals, over time. That's us.
Yay. Well, thank you very much. That was a great introduction to where we're at and hopefully where we're going to be going and what we're thinking about. It's a workshop, so I don't have to ask for public comment. So I can go right to directors' discussions or questions or thoughts.
There was lots of information in there. Out of curiosity, you talk about the Adviso pilot program and then Remotely. Is that going to incorporate with each other?
That's a good question. They're two separate systems, two separate vendors. I don't foresee a lot of areas for them to overlap. Remotely is it's similar to Zoom. However, it has an augmented reality component to it, so it would allow us to generate a Zoom meeting with a customer, but then to interact with them directly by being able to circle something on the screen so that they can see what we're talking about, and they can we can ask them to move closer to this, or and then we can take pictures using their phone camera. It'll take the picture and then it'll upload it so we get the full resolution picture that way. Whereas the Adviso home energy report, and I imagine you're referring to the virtual energy audit, that is a purely online tool for them to get a general understanding of their own energy use and how they might be able to improve things. The idea, I think, would be for them to go through the Adviso energy audit, get some initial feedback. The focus there is going to be more on behavioral improvements that they can make. And then if they want more information or they want something more specific, then they would be, kind of pointed to the RES survey so that they can get a little bit more detailed information about how they could participate in our programs.
Thank you. No, that was really good. And I just want to share my own personal experience with upgrading my home. Was built in 1985, and actually Jeff Bender was the contractor who advertised in the paper regarding some Nevada County monies or low-cost loans that you could have as part of an energy audit. Did a blow test. He came in with one of his employees and insulated the whole house and helped us put some new windows in. And at that time, I couldn't afford solar, but that was an option. But I was just, I mean, still to this day, we appreciate the work Jeff has done, you know, for the house. And it definitely helped with our, you know, conserving energy and, you know, for getting a better bang for our buck for the heating system there. So, but you know, if it's possible to offer some type of monies or loans or something for residents, you know, that are low cost, that would help them, I mean, that may be something to explore at some point. But thank you very much. I'm excited to hear that the residential surveys are going to be back, so.
Agreed. Director Bender, do you have any
Yeah, the
thoughts?
Ukrainium. Yeah, everyone loves Michael. Yeah, so that'll be great. Yeah, a deep dive here, so really appreciate that. And love to hear the electrification push, you know, with the energy code in California and many years of pushing gas. Here we are going back, going back, way back to the 70s, even earlier, or no, better with heat pumps. So,
Yes,
yeah,
better. With heat,
yeah,
that's right.
we're
doing
going
the
with heat
70s,
pumps.
way better.
Yeah. So, yeah, really appreciate and excited about these programs and expanding the department. And like you said earlier, we got to go deeper. The low-hanging fruit's done. We got to start digging in, and the energy code is kind of bringing us there as well. So if we can dovetail that with our with these programs, I think that would really help things move quicker and get us to where we want to go. Awesome. So thank you.
Yeah. I agree with all of that, what both of our directors contributed. And I had the same experience as Kim. The PUD did it for me years ago with my 1968 house that was built as a summer cabin. So it did make a very big difference, not just in our energy bills, but in our comfort, our daily comfort. So I have just a few questions. What rebates do we currently offer? Do we have any for electrification purposes? Like, you know, I know we have a water heater program. And Matt Tucker, in fact, I remember, I don't know, 8 months or so ago, he was appalled that he applied for it, and the person said, we only have like $10,000 in that program. So he felt like he decided not to take advantage of it because he felt that another customer might need it more, which I was kind of kicking. I was like, no, use it, because if we spend it, then we'll then we'll fund it more, right? Is that? But I was curious to know what the status is at this moment of what sort of rebates do we offer, and to what extent are those programs being funded?
Sure. Yeah, right now we have the water heater, the heat pump water heater rebate, which that we did run out of funds for that, but we reallocated some funds elsewhere because the program activity just overall has been down this year. To allow for a little bit more there. At this point, you know, that's the only electrification specific measure that we have, other than we do have EV chargers. We provide a rebate for EV chargers. However, a week from now, we will have you know, available the whole host of electrification measures that I had mentioned earlier, and I've already had conversation with one gentleman in town who's looking to take advantage of the heat pump rebate.
So that slide, it had pictures of a heat pump and a cooktop and a, so all of those things are going to be?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Inductive cooktops, heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, we'll continue doing the EV charger, and then we'll also be providing some incentives for panel upgrades to help people, you know, electrify, because that's one of the big
So you
barriers.
don't want them to blow their houses up. Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, good. So that's right around the corner, those programs being seeded and funded. And pushed out into the community is a big part of the success of these programs that I think that we sometimes in the past have not been as good as we might like to be. and helping people to make these decisions. But I think that's a big space that we as the PUD need to step into and own and be, yet another way that we can be a trusted advisor. We can steer them toward products that are going to work for them and that are going to work for us by pushing electrification. I do think something really important that we are dealing with right now is our reliability. If we're pushing people to electrify and we are working with PSOMs and, non-reclosing circuits during the summer for fire safety, I think that's a really big thing that we're going to have to wrestle with and try to solve. It's all, that doesn't technically fall under conservation, obviously, but things like, distributed energy resources, the more of those we have in our region, the more resilient we're going to be and the more easily we're going to spring back from disasters, catastrophes, fires, just the things that are becoming more and more common. So, how we're tying these programs, in my mind, conservation is way more than just conservation. And I think of it as one big whole greening thing. It involves greenhouse gas reduction, it involves conservation, it involves, fully utilizing the technologies that we have. We have our AMI meters, we're demand side management, changing people's behaviors. I mean, it's a huge arena to operate in. And it sounds like you are stepping into that arena. So I really appreciate that. But I think we're really going to have to, in the construct of our strategic plan and thinking about how we're going to improve our reliability before we can, and I hate saying this is like before we can push people as hard as I want them to be pushed into the electrification arena. So, a big puzzle. And of course, the duck curve, we just still need to figure out how to throttle that duck. And I imagine, it's going to be storage opportunities of various stripes, whether it's batteries or water pump or whatever else it is. But I think we can't, we would still want 100% of our daytime electricity to be renewable. And if that means we have this incredibly steep curve that we have to figure out how to not have with a combination of changing people's behaviors and new technologies, we're thinking about that. I know you're thinking about that. I know that Joe thinks about that pretty much nonstop. Sorry, I've got so many, I feel like I have so many things that it's hard to sometimes discipline my mind to get them orderly. But you hit on a lot of, I think, the really major things that we're all sort of struggling with, and how are we going to get through this this time period. These next couple of years are going to be very interesting. So, expanding from conservation to more of a sustainability, we hit that in decarbonization. And you're right, we're here to lead, which means that we have to set an example, which you talked about with our own building. If we are expecting our customers to buy EVs, we need to be buying EVs. If we want them to put solar panels on their roofs, we need to put solar panels on our roof. We need to walk the talk, and I think that's really important. And I absolutely support those changes. I talked about resiliency. This is just my notes from your presentation, the whole picture and the types of storage. Time of use, I think that's a rich area, and how are we going to change people's behaviors to start thinking about that? Because you're right, we're going backwards in time. We used to, for a long time, we were like, people use your energy in the evenings when it gets cooler because the energy, and now we're doing exactly the reverse. We're telling, nope, we got to come back and we want you to use all your energy in the daytime. And so things just keep changing. You know what? I can keep going, and we don't need me to do that necessarily. I'm grateful to hear everything that you have been thinking about, looking at, and hiring people to look at, and rate studies and time of use. And I'm excited to see how all these pieces, all this puzzle, which is what it is just a big puzzle, how we're going to do it. It's an exciting time to be at the PUD. So thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to? out there.
President Finn, if I might add, I think this is one of those topics, well, there's a lot of topics, but this one in particular, that if the board of directors has, there's a lot covered here that was just high level, 30,000 foot, and there's a lot of, lot to be done and a lot of work going on those. And so if the board has a desire to, drill down on one of these specific topics, the subtopics, or have follow-up on these through the, the appropriate process of, bringing it in the board comments to have board president direct staff to bring another item for workshop. We're glad to do that. I know there's a lot of subcommittees in the community that are working on some of these problems or issues, and we're happy to partner with all of them. Just, if there's an opportunity for us to bring something else to the board, please let us know.
Absolutely. And I think that I will be asking for those things as I sort of let the dust settle from this one and think, okay, what are the areas on here that I think deserve a brighter light shined on them? And I do want to say the Adviso program, I think that Southwest Gas already does something like that, which is good. I mean, I think it's good for us to do that as well. And when you make it sort of a competition and you get the little smiley face, I get exactly that on my Southwest bill, and it tells me how many of my neighbors I'm doing better than. And I think it's a really good idea. It does tap into basic human nature, wants to best their neighbor, weirdly, but there we are. And I would love to get us on the toilet flushing. There's a big toilet flushing contest. That would be kind of funny, but enough. So good. These are a lot of good things just here that's, I think, totally doable, and I'm looking forward to hearing how they play out in the community, and hopefully also reeling in some of our other community groups and members who are also really focused on this, like the CCL and the 100% renewable. They've offered to help spread the word of programs, so we should definitely utilize those resources as well, those human resources. Okay, I'm gonna let you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to hear your report and the opportunities that you're bringing to us to get better, to get better.
Thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Okay. Whew, I'm all. My book went blank. Okay. Okay, that was our conservation and sustainability workshop. The first of, I'm sure, a number that are going to come our ways. Which brings us to routine business tonight. We have to approve the treasurer's report, which is fund balances and disbursements all in one, although Director Aguirre is not here to. Directors, do we have any comments or about
think-
the?
I move to
Perfect.
pay the bills.
Second that?
Excellent. Can we get a roll call vote there?
Thank you. Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sweet. And finally, we have the minutes, approving the minutes of October 6th, 2021, and October 20th, 2021. Do we have a motion or a comment?
I move to approve the minutes for October 6th and October 20th, 2021.
I'll second that motion.
Excellent.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. What a chock-full meeting that was. Thank you all for
Thank
your
you.
attention and your presence and your contributions tonight. And with that, I think that we can adjourn our PUD meeting. Yay.
And thank you to staff for staying the whole time.
Yeah.